And this is the first in a actually cluster of lessons around visual texts and one specific complicated visual text. The bottom line is you can write the cleanest, most appropriate language that we can possibly do, but if the visuals that we use to elaborate or demonstrate aren't themselves good texts to use and understand, then we're really missing a real opportunity to make our information pop and be understood. So visuals often have to stand on their own and be interpretable, but they also are most often used to elaborate text, to draw interest. I mean, the media uses them all the time for a very good reason. Our eye goes to visuals, but we quickly can size up whether a visual is going to be something we can understand or not. So the question I often get is, well, where do you start? I mean, with a visual. If you're given a visual and you have to revise it or critique it, where do you start? And if you're developing one, where do you start? So that's what we're going to tackle today. So take a look at this visual. And in a minute, I'm going to ask, well, what is this text, this visual text about? And if you aren't a naturalist and you don't watch a lot of Nature Channel, you probably don't know that this is a bowerbird. This is a male, and he's trying to attract a female, a mate. And what the bowerbird does remarkably well is he constructs this sometimes very huge bower nest and adorns the front of it with colorful seeds or flowers. And in this case, man-made bottle caps, saying, hey, look here, look at all this blue I have. Will you be my mate? So again, without the context, without any label on this, any linguistic information, it's really difficult. And when I first saw it and was learning about bowerbirds, I really thought, my first thing was, oh my God, he's going to eat this toxic stuff. Is that why he looks blue? You can imagine all kinds of logical interpretations of a visual. So what we're going to look at is how important the linguistic information that goes along with the visual is, as well as the visual itself. So take a look at the next text we're going to look at, and this is the focal one for this lesson. Probably doesn't take you long to at least figure out that this is something about what happens to wastewater. You know, where nasty water goes and how it gets cleaned up, if it gets cleaned up. And depending on your technical knowledge or you're interested in solid waste management, more or less, you'll understand about this. And you'd need some time to work through the actual process because there's multiple steps in this process. So what we know is that we can simplify at one level, and this is one diagram, we'll go back to it, and you can simplify even further, and lots of variations in between. So what we're going to look at is, where do you start? If you're going to simplify, if you're going to start with an original text and then have a revision and then perhaps an even simpler revision for another target audience, what does it look like? The first place to begin, a good place to begin, let's call it the low-hanging fruit, is the title, the big label at top, wastewater treatment process. It's fine if you know what wastewater is. It's even better if you know that treatment is not, I'm going to treat you well, but rather it's some other kind of biological process in this case, and a process that involves steps. All of that gets packed into those three little words. So we always want to look at a title and we want to offer solutions. So in the first rewrite we saw before, and you'll see again, how wastewater is cleaned and reused was the title we settled on. And then for the simpler version, still a question, which can also be a good format to use. What happens to sewer water? Making that assumption that wastewater may not be a familiar term. So The title of something is what we call in linguistics, well, a superordinate pre-statement, but an advance organizer. It says to you, the reader or the viewer, get ready to read about or listen to or see and look for X. So if we're saying, well, what is this text trying to do? What is its main propositions? What kind of story is it going to tell us? Then a title gives us a very good leg up on that. Now, the second thing we try to do most of the time, again, some low-hanging fruit, is looking at labels. So if you have primary clarifier sedimentation, which doesn't mean a lot to most of us, a clarifier might be a better label, again, and even getting clean or cleaning as a better label for that kind of process. Again, these are not, either ors. These are just ways for you to begin to look at being flexible in assuming what your viewer might know, what context they have, and then applying some really good linguistic flexibility in your labels. Another label, digester. If you know anatomy and you know a bit about how the digestion system works, things get used, things get discarded, digester might be right. Somebody could read digest into it and sort of work with the title. But if you're concerned about that or concerned with this, digester to reduce solids, which is one possible rewrite or alternative, I would still be concerned with the average person who doesn't understand that anatomical function and doesn't quite understand how it can be used metaphorically for sewer water. You may just say, okay, this is the stomach. And all of us know that a lot of things go on in the stomach, and a lot of things get into the stomach, go into the stomach, and come out in different ways. Again, it's just the idea of focusing on these labels and how powerful they are and how important it is for the vocabulary to be appropriate. So things like activated sludge or anaerobic or aeration are really high-level science words and don't carry much meaning for the average reader and wouldn't help them interpret this diagram, this text. Take a minute, look at some of the other potential high barrier, difficult labels. Here are some of them as we saw them: residential, biosolids, dewatering, estuary, paddock. If I don't know what aeration is, then I say, oh, this goes to a pond. A pond? Is that the pond down near the ballpark? You can imagine the interpretation that winds up being misinterpretation. So how'd you do with the vocabulary? Don't worry. Again, this is the first in a number of lessons about this specific visual. And then there are subsequent lessons moving through different types of visuals and what other elements can one work on. So, hope this was helpful and see you soon.